I've announced a lot of names on a lot of stages, but this is one that I'm truly honored. Mr. George Romero. So let's first start off with the social commentary of your films. Did you always want to do that, or is this just retroactive thinking?
You know, it's a little bit of both. When we made the first film, Night, we were interested, we didn't mean it to be a racial statement. Wayne happened to be the best actor from among our friends. And the film, we didn't change the script. And when Jack and I wrote the script, we were in our heads, the guy was Caucasian. And when we cast Dwayne, when Dwayne agreed to do the role, we just didn't change the script. So to that extent, yeah, I mean, we thought we were being pretty cool for not, by not changing the script. And I actually come to think that maybe we should have addressed it because it's so obvious. But what we wanted to do, what we wanted to tell was a story about, the world is sinking into chaos. And this was in the late 60s, and the world was, sort of looked like it was on its way into the toilet again. And we wanted to do something about, despite this incredible sort of earth-shattering thing that people stick to their own agendas and wind up arguing about stupid things and dig their own graves by doing that. And that's what it was meant to be about. It was meant to be about miscommunication, lack of communication, and all that. Race wasn't on our mind. What happened was, the night that Russ Streiner and I drove, we were driving in the car, taking the first answer print of Night to New York in order to show it to distributors to see if somebody wanted to pick it. We heard on the radio that Martin Luther King had been assassinated that day. And all of a sudden, the movie, you couldn't see the movie as anything but race. And particularly, we realized then, because of all the scenes at the end with the posse and all these, they looked like scenes out of newsrooms. And so it became a racial statement at that point. But what we did have that social commentary in mind, more about just people's inability to cooperate, even faced with disaster. So that was it. But now, then, I freaked out. I mean, I didn't make another zombie film for 10 years, even though, first of all, Night of the Living Dead went out and it actually made money on its first played in drive-ins, neighborhood theaters, and like that. And it actually returned money. It returned 3 times what it cost to make. And so we said, let's make another one. But it never really got discovered. It never really became an important film, in quotes, until the French discovered it, which was about 3 years later. And after that, incredible. I mean, the Museum of Modern Art picked it up, and all of a sudden it was, became Night of the Living Dead. And then I freaked. I said, I can't do another one of these things unless I have some reason, or unless I can put something in it that has substance. And I wound up 10 years after the fact, I wound up visiting the shopping mall where we shot Dawn. I socially knew the people that developed that mall. And it was the first indoor shopping mall that we had ever seen. It was the first one in western Pennsylvania. And now they're on every corner, but we'd never seen anything like that. And it seemed to me like it was this temple to consumers. And I got the idea. And that's how Dawn happened. And then from that point on, I started to really became a shtick, became kind of, okay, I got to do a little social satire or something with all these films, and I can drag the zombies out of the closet and use them for almost anything. much easier to do that than to try to do serious films about those topics. I get to say what I want to say, and I can hide behind the zombies.
So you've inspired so many. Who inspired you?
Oh boy, I have to say, well, the guy that the film that made me want to make movies was a film called Tales of Hoffman, which has just been restored. Scorsese is responsible for the restoration. And we're actually going to New York in a couple of weeks to see the print. And it's a strange film. Michael Powell is the filmmaker. And this film, it's an opera. So anybody that likes opera is going to love it. People that don't like opera are going to say, wait, what? But it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy story about these three unrequited loves. Actually, there's a fourth, which is in the wraparound story. And this guy falls in love once with a vampire, once with a mechanical doll, and once with a terminally ill woman. And so it's this beautiful, beautiful fantasy. And it should have had a budget, but Michael didn't have a big budget. And so he wound up using techniques which were obvious. I could see how he was doing this stuff, like double exposures and reversing the film, playing it backwards, and stuff like that. And I realized, I saw this when I was like 12 years old. And I realized that, maybe I could, it was accessible. I think if I had seen Jurassic Park at that age, I would have said, forget about it. They're never going to do that. But I could see that they did these things. And so I started to play around and experiment. And my uncle had an 8mm camera, and so I was able to, shoot and start to shoot. And I just sort of kept shooting. But that guy, and I would say Wells, probably Orson Welles.
So early in your career, you worked on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I'm from Pittsburgh.
Are you?
Yeah, so
okay.
I have a few of those questions for you.
Yeah, well, I made some pretty scary movies back then. I used to do, he used to have a feature on the show called Picture Picture. And I don't know if you remember that, but I've been in Pittsburgh. And they were remotes, they did everything from how do you make a light bulb to, he said Mr. Rogers gets a tonsillectomy, which was a particularly scary one. And so I used to shoot all the things that were outside the studio.
So Pittsburgh had its own horror host, as many cities do.
Chili?
Yep, Chili, Billy Cardell. Talk about your relationship with him and what he meant for Night of the Living Dead in your career.
Well, this guy, Bill Cardell, had a Chiller Theater, it was called, 11 o'clock, I think it was 11 o'clock show on Saturday nights. And when he heard we were making the film, he's actually in the movie, came out to be the reporter. And all the time that we were shooting it, he was giving us all kinds of support. He plugged us every week on his show. We made appearances on his show. And in the end, he wound up bringing out his cameraman and got us the helicopter. And that was a WPIX helicopter, I think. And he was just a great, great supporter. And a wonderful guy. I mean, we became buddies over the years. And I wound up, when I did Day of the Dead, the woman that plays the lead in Day of the Dead, it's his daughter, Lori. So he's still around, still kicking. He's a great guy.
So, filming in Pittsburgh, you had a lot of talent to choose from. Lori, Joe Pilato, John Amplis. Talk about discovering some of those folks.
Well, there was a real pool of talent there. There were a lot of stuff being shot there. When I was working on Mr. Rogers, Michael Keaton was a grip on the show. And, here he is now. He played with me. A lot of, there's a wonderful, is still a wonderful theater school there, Carnegie Mellon. A lot of people came out of there. Many of the people from Carnegie Mellon are in my films, both before and after they graduated. Ted Danson was a Carnegie Mellon guy. So there was a huge talent pool always in Pittsburgh. And then also people from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I don't know where Joe Pilato came from. He came from the moon.
Somewhere.
I think he was originally, I don't know, Jersey or New York. I don't know where he was from.
He lived in Oakland when Day came out. I was talking to him, so
Yeah.
he had to be from somewhere.
Yeah. So, but anyway, he was living in Pittsburgh at the time. And he did a couple of films. He was in a couple of films that I did. Randy Kovitz was a Carnegie Mellon guy. Anyway, a great pool of talent there. John Amplis I saw in a play, and I needed this sort of innocent guy to play Martin. And I needed this sort of sweet, innocent type. I didn't want him to be in any way, resemble a vampire in that traditional sense. And he was great. I saw him in this little play where he did a lot of miming. And he plays a mime actually in Night Riders. He played Martin, played the role of Martin. And I saw him in a little play at the Pittsburgh Playhouse.
You went to CMU. What was it about Pittsburgh that made you want to stay there and film there?
Well, I grew up in the Bronx in New York. And I was a Latino kid who was constantly getting beaten up by the Italian guys. And so, I fled, basically. I fled New York. I just went to Pittsburgh to go to school, and I just said, wow, this is more like it. I loved it. Actually, it's a great city. It's even nicer now. Because when I went there, you had to change your shirt 3 times a day because of the dust from the steel mills. I mean, at noon, it would look like, 7 o'clock in the evening because of the smog and the soot. But I loved it. I just loved it. So I stuck around.
How did your friendship and working relationship start with Tom Savini?
Well, Tom, it's a kind of a long story. When the first film that we tried to make was this sort of high-minded, serious piece, Bergman-esque, about the Middle Ages, no less. A coming-of-age movie in the Middle Ages. And we needed 2 teenage actors. And we went around and looked at high school plays. And Tom was the guy that we picked to play the role. Anyway, the movie never happened. We could never raise the money. And we parted ways. And years later, we were doing Martin. We were ready to cast Martin. And Tom stepped off the elevator. And I hadn't seen him since high school. He had been to Vietnam and done service, and he was a war photographer, combat photographer. Anyway, Tom gets off the elevator and says, "Remember me?" And he goes like this, and with a razor blade, slashed his wrist, dropped on the floor. And, okay. And immediately he sprang up and probably did a somersault to get up. And we just reacquainted with each other, and he had been doing effects work. And he came to apply to do the effects work on Martin. But I said, "Hey, do you still want to do any acting?" And he said, "Sure." So I wound up casting him in one of the roles in Martin. And he wound up doing the effects. And we're still together. I haven't been able to use him on Land of the Dead, because that was a studio pictures, and they wanted a firm, they wanted somebody that had that they could sue, basically. So they wound up going with Nicotero's company, K&B.
So before we get sort of into some of your films, Give us some of your honest opinions of the remakes. Obviously, Savini's remake of Night, The Crazies, Dawn of the Dead, and even I think there was a Day of the Dead one that you don't have to.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Day of the Dead. I think there were 2 Day of the Dead.
Yeah, don't.
Yeah, people have told me to, and I think there's a Creep Show too out there somewhere that was.
Creep Show 3, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Somewhere. But I didn't have anything to do with it, nor did Steve. But anyway, I don't know. I thought the Dawn remake, Zach is a good filmmaker. I thought the first 20 minutes or so were, pretty hot. But then the bottom line is I didn't think there was any reason to make that film. I mean, when we made Dawn, as I said, it was the first shopping mall that we'd ever seen, and so that was important. It was a character in the film, and by the time they did the remake, that didn't have any impact anymore. The idea of the shopping mall didn't mean anything, and they had to fictionalize the names of the stores and everything else. It just felt a little false to me, so I didn't see the reason for remaking it. And Tom's version of Night, I think, is underrated and really pretty good. I love Shaun of the Dead. Just great. And I've become pretty good friends with those guys, Simon and Nick.
You actually had them in Land of the Dead.
They're in Land of the Dead, yeah. But Simon and Edgar, yeah, are in Land of the Dead. Take a photo with a zombie. I'm trying to. The Crazies, I thought again the point of the Crazies that we made. One of the points of the film was that you didn't know who was crazy. You're not supposed to know who was crazy because the guys in the government are supposed to look just as crazy as the people on the street. Well, when they're green and full of pus, you sort of can tell. So. Again, I just thought it was unnecessary, but...
Well, also that brings up the question of, what do you think of fast-moving zombies?
Well, by me, I don't think zombies can't move fast, as far as I'm concerned. I think they're much better. I think they're scarier when they're just coming after you, slow, inexorable, and I think that's scarier. Come on. Fast running zombies, and then they blur. They become just a brown texture. I like giving them a little character. A baseball player, a nun. Get a look at them and remind us that they're us. Whereas all the ones in Zach's, they just all have Nikes and jeans and running shoes. Not only running, but under crank. The camera was under crank, so they ran faster. I don't get it. And World War Z too. I just don't like it.
So let's go to Night of the Living Dead. It's a film that created a genre. When you were writing it with Jack, what was going through your minds? I think it was supposed to originally be called The Flesh Eaters.
Yeah.
And there was a zombie genre, sort of the Haitian zombies. How did you go about wanting to change that to becoming what we know as zombie today?
Well, first of all, we didn't call them zombies. We just wanted, as I say, we wanted to do a story about people not responding to a crisis situation. And so we just came up with it. We said, okay, people are not staying dead. The neighbors are not staying dead. And the reason that they're not digging their way out of graves, they can't, they're too weak. But the recently dead, like there's one nude in there who's with a morgue tag on. But we tried to make it clear that they were recently dead and they were getting back up and walking around. Then we made them flesh eaters just to make it more gruesome. And that was it. That was the extent. We said, okay, that's our monster. And that was it. We didn't call them zombies. We just called them ghouls or those things. And never thought of them as zombies. But now that, then by the time I made Dawn, everyone, you know, everybody that was writing about the film was calling them zombies, and so I said, well, I'll join the pack. And so I call them zombies in Dawn.
After all these years, you never gave us a reason for why this happened. Did you ever come up with a reason, or did you?
Yeah, we had actually three. One was a virus, and one was the satellite, and I forget what the third one was. I don't know what it was. Some sort of military experiments or something. You know, there were three. We wound up having to cut 9 minutes out of the film, and the other things were all on television. It was just the newscaster talking about them. And that was more, you know, just sort of more of the same. That was obvious stuff to cut out. We kept the one about the satellite because we had gone to Washington, D.C. to shoot that. So we drove, and, you know, we got the car, and had production value, and it opened it up a little bit instead of just being on the TV screen. So the other explanations just got axed. But even the TV guide blurbs now say, returning satellite causes the dead to come back to life. And that was not, unfortunately, we should have seen that coming. Should have known that was going to happen. But that's the story behind that.
So moving to Martin, you know, talk about coming up with the alternative version of the vampire film.
Well, I started out wanting to do a sort of a vampire comedy about what would happen, you know, if you were a vampire, you'd have to get a new driver's license every so often, and you know, the problems of being a vampire. And then I just settled into thinking about it in a more serious way, and you know, it evolved very slowly into the screenplay for Martin, and I decided to just go that way with it. And I don't think he is a vampire. I don't believe he's a vampire. I think he likes to drink blood, but that doesn't make him a vampire in the supernatural sense. And I don't think he is. And he's just this honest guy that goes on the radio. Is you know, probably, I don't know if he's not necessarily retarded, but a little slow in his thought process, and innocent, basically innocent. And that was the idea behind that film.
Now there's rumors there's a 2-hour and 45-minute cut of the film.
Yeah, I know. And someone just told me that the Arrow version, I don't know if anybody can confirm this, someone today just told me that came with the Arrow, British Arrow version of Martin. And apparently it's got a lot of footage in there that's not in the US release. The only place that could have come from is from that missing 2-hour and 40-minute or whatever, 2.5 hour, I forget however long it was. We had one 16mm print of it. We made that print, and that was the only existing print. And then we did the final cut, and but we had that one print, and it disappeared. It vanished one day, and it's the biggest mystery in my life. I mean, I'd love to see it. You know, I'd love to just be able to see it again, just to remember. But if there is really footage on that Arrow version, then they might know who supplied it and where it went. But I'm dying to see the Arrow version just to see if it's true. Sometimes they put, you know, there's a million versions of Night of the Living Dead out there that say extra footage, bonus footage. Not true.
Now, you shot Martin in Braddock.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most visually stunning films that you've done, because Braddock was just so run down, and sadly still is.
Yeah.
It almost, like you said, the mom is a character in the film. Talk about, did you try to make Braddock a character of the film?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously you couldn't help but you know, look at it that way. And we sort of pushed it a little bit. The church and you know, the altar is an old TV, I think, and we were just sort of pushing the funkiness of the whole place, and that little funky parade that comes along, that Martin joins in, and Gordon did a great job shooting that film, and it was the first time that I didn't shoot it myself, and That's not true. Bill Heinzman did a lot of the shooting on The Crazy. But it's the first time that I did a film without shooting any of it at all myself. And he did great. But yes, obviously, and you know, you couldn't help it. Couldn't help it. Everywhere you looked, this was this run down, you know, and in that sense, almost beautiful, you know, looking place. And you know, there people still waiting for the mills to reopen. It ain't gonna happen. Ain't gonna happen. But they're still waiting, as you say. They're still waiting.
So we moved to Dawn. It seems you add a little bit more of a comedic element to this film. Talk a little bit about that, if you could.
Well, you know, it's pretty hard when you do it. You know, you're working with guys like Savini and all of us that are gleeful about horror. And, some people hide their eyes. We giggle. So it's hard to just not have a good time. And so then, therefore, it's hard to not make jokes about the stuff that you like. I mean, you know, we did a pie fight. I mean, you know, we all just said, hey, how about a pie fight? That, which didn't make sense, you know, but made sense to us. Shooting seltzer at each other and stuff. And silly, you can't help but be silly when you're around a bunch of guys that enjoy it so much. And it was great. Dario Argento didn't understand what it was about. His version, he cut most of the humor out of it, or a lot of the humor out of it. He didn't think it was. He said, that is harder. It's supposed to be harder.
It said that you went to Rome to write the script.
Yeah.
Talk about that if you
Well, as I said, I saw the shopping mall. I went out to visit the shopping mall actually before it was open. And I got the idea. And it so happened right then, actually a couple of weeks right after that, I started to write some notes. And a couple of weeks right after that, Dario Argento called me up through my agent and said, asked me if I would ever consider making a second zombie film. And I said, you know, it's funny you should ask. I just got this idea. And he just said, great. He sent me an airline ticket, flew me to Rome, and put me in an apartment. And said, you're right. So I did.
So we just had the Dawn of the Dead panel before yours, and we were talking about the alternate ending.
Yeah.
What do you remember being filmed? Was it all filmed or pieces?
Well, we never filmed the actual disaster. We never filmed her head in the blades. But Galen, I think, stood up, and the implication was that she was standing up into the chopper blades. And we never shot the effects for it. But we did shoot her standing up. There was a point where she steps out of the helicopter and looks up, stands up. As I remember this, I don't know what I don't know how they remember. And Ken, we wound up, the implication was that he shoots himself with the Derringer. And then we went on and he put the gun down and took off. And that's as far as it went. But we would have been able to if anyone insisted that we stick with the script. Because we literally had to, when we made the deal to produce the film, we literally had to sign every page of the script so that we could show that we actually shot it all. And so we were a little paranoid about that. And we weren't sure that we were going to be able to sell them on the ending when they escaped.
Was it important for you that they escaped? Is that why you changed?
You know, as we started to shoot, I started to like the people, and I realized that, you know, this is taking a much more humorous type. There's a lot of comedy in this thing, and we should stick with that. You know, we can't kill all these people off. And I like the people. And I didn't think that the tone of the film was right. The reason everybody died was because in my head, somewhere in the back of my mind, when I was writing the original script, there was a sequel tonight. And so it's got to be tragic, right? And I came to realize through the course of making Dawn that the world can still be in chaos. That's tragedy enough. These characters could escape. And that was my reasoning there. So that was it.
Well, one question. Night, dawn, and day. What's the timeline of those? Do you have one? Do they happen on the same day? Obviously, day is a little further on.
Yeah, day is further on.
What's the
They were all,
time?
I don't know, between night and dawn, it's hard, I can't really put a finger on it, I don't know. Obviously, it's been happening for a couple of weeks. I mean, everything's in chaos now. It's not just Evans City. It's, you know, the TV stations are going off the air, and so it's got to be, probably a couple of weeks. I don't know. There's this society of mathematicians and scientists that actually do all the calculations about how long would it take for the zombies to, get rid of humankind. And I've seen numbers anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 months, but so I don't know, somewhere in there.
So Creepshow, talk about working with Stephen King.
Well, Steve is just a great guy. Blue suede shoes, plays in a rock band, owns a piece of the Red Sox. He's just that kind of guy. He's not at all a horrible guy. He's just I think a wonderful writer. He makes it, he puts it right in your life, and he's able to do that because he uses brand names, and he makes it part of the world, the real world. And that's it. He's just a great guy. We had a great time working together. I think he still holds a grudge because of the way I asked him to do Jordy Verrill. He plays this character, Jordy Verrill, in Creepshow. He plays it really broadly, And I said, think of it as a Coyote Roadrunner cartoon. And he took it to heart. He did it exactly that way, but I think he still thinks it was the wrong way to go.
So we moved to Day of the Dead. Always said the darkest chapter in the original trilogy. Talk about the original script, which was said to be much larger than what we saw in film. Talk a little bit about
that. The original script for Day of the Dead was, in fact, much bigger in scope. It budgeted in at about $6 million, or somewhere between 6 and 7 million. And the distributor, actually the producer, Salah Hassan, said that he would do it. He would do it at 6 million or 6.5, if I would agree to make it an R-rated film. And so we sat around the table, and I said, I'd really like to not have to, And he didn't want to do it R-rated too, because he had distributed Dawn and had a great success with it, unrated. And so he felt that it should be unrated. And actually I did too. I wanted it to be unrated. So that's the main reason I had to cut it down. He said, I'll go 3 on an unrated film. And so that I had to cut it down to a $3 million budget.
You sort of took, the comedic turn with Dawn. Was it just the time frame in the canon of the story is why you took such a dark turn for Day of the Dead?
No. I think it was, the time. It was getting, the times were just getting crazy. I mean, nobody was trusting anybody anymore. And it was, it was all big money, and so I just sort of the way I felt. And I said, this mistrust, if there were people that survived, they wouldn't trust each other. And the military would probably be, in control. They'd be the equivalent of a mini Pentagon or a mini CIA, or, and I don't know, it just came into my head exactly that way.
No, Laurie Cardell played Sarah.
Yeah.
Talk about the transition from Barbara, who was sort of the almost catatonic in Night, to really the female heroine in Day of the Dead.
Well, I actually there was a stepping stone to that, because when I wrote the remake that Tom directed of Night of the Dead, and Barbara's much stronger in that, and that was my sort of apology. I mean, when we did the original Night, it was, we were coming out of the old tradition of horror films, and she was sort of, femme fatale, or the Perils of Pauline, and, her shoes were falling off, and she couldn't even run without her shoes falling, breaking her heels, and, all the traditional sort of Perils of Pauline stuff. And she basically is an ineffectual character throughout. I always felt, once I realized that, once I sort of a couple of years later was looking at the film, I said, "Oi, what have I done?" Kind of had one of those moments, and so I just felt that I needed to apologize a little bit to women, and so when in the remake, Barbara's a strong person again, and Patty Tallman, the way she played it, and Sarah was a further extension of that.
Now, filmed in the Wampa mine.
Yeah.
Talk about some of the challenges that you had working in those conditions, because it's at what, 58 degrees all the time?
58 degrees, constant temperature, and after a while it gets mighty cheery, and we all had limestone in our lungs, I think, for months after. Maybe we still have some. So it was tough. It was really tough. And that's it, just rough physical conditions. And the whole set was there, except for we had a week in Florida.
Right. Now, one of the most memorable scenes, I think, in Day is the late Richard Liberty and Joe Pilato.
Yeah.
That scene. Now, was that something that you specifically wrote, or did you let them sort of ad-lib anything with that?
No, it's hard for me to remember. I know there was a bit of ad-libbing going on there, but much of that, as I remember it, is in the script. But I mean, they played it. They were great. And they were great together. They played off each other. Again, Joe, I think, feels that I didn't do it too broadly. I couldn't help but go for that.
Now, he once said that it was your writing, but do you believe it was your writing or his acting that made him more of a villain than the zombies?
Well, I think it's the intention of the script, but I think the way he plays it, he's just such an arch. I mean, he's complete. I can't think of Dudley, whatever his name is, not Dudley Do Right, but the other guy. But he's just a complete villain, and very broadly stroked. And I think that he's concerned about that. And I said, I want there to be no question about this. And I think use the term silent movies. And just go for the throat with it. And that's what he did.
No.
He's usually a subtler actor.
Really?
Yeah.
Not in person.
No, not in person. If he were here, he'd be shouting. Shouting his lines still.
Now, Monkey Shines. I read that the studio made major cuts to that film.
Yeah.
Talk about what that did to maybe hinder your vision of what that film was supposed to be.
Well, it didn't really hinder my vision. I was really pissed off about them wanting to make the cuts, but I'll tell you what happened there. There's this thing where you can't get final cut unless you're, Spielberg. But what they give you is they'll say, okay, we'll give you 2 cuts and 2 previews. That's what they give you. They give you previews. Thanks. So what happened was we had the cut of Monkey Shines and we previewed it. And I'm telling you, the preview process is controlled by the studios. There's only 2 companies that do it. At the time when we did Monkey Shines, there was only 1 company doing preview screenings. And they record the audience, audio. They record video of the audience. And then they pass out these comment cards, which are completely inadequate. Like there's a question, what did you like best about the movie? Beginning, middle, end. That's it. Multiple choice. What did you like least about the movie? Beginning, middle, end. And give me a break. So they can use these stats to make you do whatever they want you to do. They confiscated the audio tapes, they confiscated the cards, they confiscated everything. We were not allowed to see them. They told us that they hate the ending. The audience hates the ending. Okay. When we finally got to see the cards, which was, we pressed, I think we got lawyers on them or whatever. They showed us, they wouldn't give us the tapes, but they gave us the comment cards. When we looked at the comment cards, what the audience didn't like was the fact that the guy recovered. The guy, it's about a paraplegic. And in the book, he doesn't recover. They would never have financed the film if he didn't recover. And so I actually did the research and I found a medical condition that could be misdiagnosed so that they could say, oh, you know, the docs missed this. You know, there's a chance here that you could get better. And this was legit. It was all legit. And so he recovers. That's what the audience objected to. And in fact, we got picketed by disabled people about this issue. The ending that I liked, that I loved, that I really wanted, which Orion hated, all through the film, there's this scientist working on this experimental vaccine. We're using monkeys as guinea pigs. And it winds up genetically altering these monkeys. That's what the story is about. The dean of the university wants to get his hands on this serum. And in the end, the last scene of the film that I had was the dean loading a syringe and a monkey jumps on his shoulder, not to attack him, but wanting the serum. And we irised in camera did an iris in, and that was the ending. Orion wanted that out of there. They just desperately wanted it out of there. But they made it seem as though that's what the audience was complaining about. They said, it's clear, the audience doesn't like the ending. You have to change it. And so they let me write it. So I did that stupid thing, you know, the sort of alien, a monkey coming out of the guy's back during the surgery. That became the ending of the movie. Then when we finally saw those comment cards, we realized that that's not what they were complaining about at all. But, you know, that's the way the studios move you around. Mark Platt, the president of the studio at the time, no, he wasn't. It was Mike Meadow. You know, said, oh yeah? Well, if you don't change it, we'll open your movie in flight. How do you like that? So...
Not much you could do.
They got you by the shorts.
So, Land of the Dead, another studio film. What brought you back to the zombie genre under a studio?
We had an independent distributor. I wanted a lot. Once I decided that I could do social satire with these movies, I decided that I had this idea that maybe I could do one every 10 years. And that you'd see the changes in societal changes, and, you know, it reflect, you know, a decade of change. And I wound up not being able to do 9/11 happened, and I couldn't do the, you know, when I was trying to sell that script, you know, they said, forget about it. I had a script, a script for Land, which was much different, much darker. And I wasn't able to sell it for beanstalk beans. You know, everybody said, no, we want happy movies. So that was it. So I sort of put it on the shelf and abandoned that idea of doing it. And then fled. My partner and I, we were in Hollywood for about 8 years, developing all kinds of projects with big names, Chris Columbus, and big producers. Goosebumps, we developed Goosebumps. We developed The Mummy. The Mummy was greenlit. we did and then it blew apart because we had another film. Anyway, it was just nuts. We made more money than we made in our entire careers, but we never made a movie. And so I just got fed up. And this was sort of the last straw. I said, I can't sell a zombie film now, forget about it. But I had a little script called Bruiser, and we went to Canal Plus and got it financed in France, and went to Canada to shoot it, which is what introduced me to Canada. And I'm living there now, but fell in love with the place. And it was the first time I'd done something not in Pittsburgh. And I lost track of the question. It was, I was going somewhere with that.
Just what brought you back to the zombie genre?
Oh, yeah. So then, the script the original script for Land was still lying around, and this producer, Mark Campbell, saw it. Big producer, heavyweight, used to be president of Universal. And loved it. He said, we should do this, let's just try to spruce it up, bring it up to date, and, he said, let's not make it quite so angry. And so I said, sure. And so I wrote, Peter, my partner, and I sat down and, really focused on the script and made it sort of post 9/11-ish, but even though the towers looks a little like, the 9/11, but that was it. Now, the price of that was, he said, well, and of course we'll have a budget, we'll have a much bigger budget, but the price of that means that you have to have names, you have to have, caterers, you have to have enough of a budget to buy Dennis Hopper's cigars. True, Dennis Hopper cigars with a line item on the budget. So, that comes with a lot of baggage. I love Dennis. I love Simon Baker. John Leguizamo's a sweetheart, just great. Asia was great. Dario Argento's daughter is in this, Asia. And, that wasn't the problem. The problem was the money and having to rob Peter to pay Paul and, trying to get that extra day. When you're working on that kind of budget, I was used to being able to get it. We need an extra week, we could buy it. We could squeak out enough bread to buy it. But, at $250,000 a day or whatever the hell it is, you can't buy an extra day. So, we had to hurry up and finish it. I just got fed up with it, and I said, we really don't need this. Let me go back. So with Diary and with Survival, I went back to $2 and $3 million budget, purposely to just get that taste out of my mouth.
One last question from me before we turn it over to the audience.
Yeah.
The Land of the Dead premiered at the Bayham Theater, which was formerly the Fulton,
Right.
which is where Night premiered.
How do you know all this stuff?
I'm a big fan. Talk about going back all those years later for that premiere where your original film premiered.
Well,
Was it rewarding, to say the least?
I guess it was, yeah. But I wasn't thinking of it that way at all. I was more wrapped up in the moment. And it was a great screening. It was really one of the best screenings that we had of that film. And a lot of my buddies came for that screening, and so I was just more wrapped up in everything that was going on around.
You had some pretty heavy hitters at that screening. Quentin Tarantino was there.
Tarantino came, and Rodriguez, yeah. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. But I never really flashed back that way at all. I wasn't even sure that it was the same theater, was it? Okay.
All right, questions from the audience for Mr. Romero?
Yeah.
As a videographer, can you comment on the change from 8mm film all the way to digital and how you kind of saw it and how you enjoyed it?
How what?
how like you've seen like the progress of how cameras have changed and how it's like affected you as a director and a videographer.
Oh, cameras. Well, I mean, my first camera was my uncle's 8mm camera, with not Super 8, just old-fashioned 8. Then I started to shoot 35 almost right away because we had a little commercial company that we were doing beer commercials and industrial films, and we were working in 35 often, mostly 16, but we did all our big stuff in 35. And that was it. That's the camera we used on when we made Night. So I don't find anything different. I stopped shooting myself, and so I don't have to deal with it in a certain sense, you know. And the DPs, you know, deal with that stuff. I feel no different, actually. I mean, if you can shoot it with anything, you know. I'm more concerned about the blocking and, you know, the lighting and the movement of the actors and the mood of the thing. So I don't really have to worry anymore. It's somebody else's concern. I have to say that since we're shooting digital, it's a big weight off the budget because, you know, you can. I love practical effects. I love the splatter when it's real, when you're doing it actually live. But it's almost impossible, unaffordable. If you have to do what we did to hire the dead on $2 million, and if we had to clean up the mess every time it didn't work, we never would have gotten finished. So it's much easier to, you know, somebody points the gun, somebody falls, the other guy falls. Paint in the guns, paint in the gun flash, and paint in the blood. You're off the set, and so it makes it a lot easier. I don't think it looks exactly as good, but it you know, it sells. It certainly works well enough. So that's been a big thing. Also, with you know, with these cameras now, you can it's almost like having a dark room. You can go in and not worry about exposure. You can dodge things. You can make, you know, part of the frame lighter, part of the frame darker. We used to just have to use a gel over the whole frame, over the whole picture, and change the whole image. Now you can go in there and paint almost. So that's terrific.
Everybody, put your hands together for the legend, George Romero.